Things was never fair. I'd rather be this starving artist, experience life now at its farthest. One blue sky, we are under, torn and shred now, ripped asunder. The politics, war and famine. I thank God I'm still here jamming. Train your mind.
Who's to blame? The thoughts I have ultimately might be something which you don't resonate with. They don't strike a chord with your being. Maybe they strike your being in being something that you have a distaste for. But don't blame me for being something that you don't like. Blame what made me me rather than blaming me for being that which you don't prefer. For how much did I really have in the part of making me who I am? Ultimately, am I not the culmination of experiences which came before me and the experiences around me? So blame the thing which made me me, but don't blame me myself for being something that you don't like. That doesn't mean that you don't have the right to hate what you see, but don't blame me for being me. Blame that which made me. For am I not merely the culmination of the sculptor? The clay which stands before you, shaped and molded into body and mind, is ultimately just the embodiment of all which has happened around me, which has influenced me, both before and simultaneously. These occurrences ultimately made me what I am. So therefore, is it right to say that you hate me because I made myself? You have ultimately the right to hate a product, to hate something, to dislike it. But you can't blame something which you dislike for being that which you dislike. But you can dislike it. And it can actually be imprisoned if it is something which is not conducive towards the collective wills and desires of things around it. But ultimately, those things around it can't necessarily blame it for being something which is non-conducive for those things around it. Because ultimately, it was those things around it which made it into being something which was non-conducive for all those things around it. So don't blame me for being something which is non-conducive to all these things around me. But all the things around me need to blame themselves for being what made me into being something that was non-conducive to all these things around me. That doesn't mean that you have to like me for being this, and ultimately the judgment will be stricken upon me if I truly take action which is not in the best interest for the situation of the collective wills and desires of all the things around me. For things which ultimately are this way are still judged and have the right to be judged. Because if they are not judged, then ultimately what ends up happening is they will be let loose on the rampage. But don't blame the thing for being on the rampage itself. Blame what ultimately caused the thing to go on the rampage. That doesn't mean that you don't have the right to stop the rampage, but truly, did the thing itself which is going on the rampage actually, truly cause itself or truly have control to will itself not to be on the rampage which you're ultimately fighting? And if something is going against everything which you've tried to build, then maybe you need to look in the mirror and at yourself and say, how is it that this thing turned out this way? And what is it that we can do so that it doesn't happen again? Because ultimately, the thing itself wasn't what caused itself to do this. It was the culmination of all that was around it and that was before it. So don't blame me for being me, but blame me for what made me. If you don't like what I think, then don't blame me for having these thoughts, but blame all that was around me and that was before me, ultimately deciding my thoughts for me.
Train your mind, now hear my words. Twitter pated little birds. If you've kept up with all my posts, then your life's just like a ghost, already dead in the machine. The screen and life, one's in between.